Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is Professor Hamamoto, and I'm here with you on June 7th already, 2026, and the time is 4:03 p.m. PDT. Thank you very much for joining me today. I have a very exciting talk that I have prepared for you that I was working on to the very last moment, and I decided that I was going to emphasize the opportunities in the new economy, the new economy, the post analog, the post legacy media. And by post legacy media, I'm talking about not just the golden age of Hollywood, which I talk about quite a bit on this channel, and some of the major players of old and of the contemporary times. Most recently, I gave a talk on Anthony Pelicano, but he's for the most part in retirement. Today, I'm going to be shifting the focus on one of the people that was in close touch with Anthony Pelicano, but for some reason or another, he doesn't mention him in his autobiography, which is this one here that I have. It's called Who is Michael Ovitz? Do you know the answer to that? If you do, then you probably are up on the latest, well, not the latest, but on the last 20, maybe even 30 years worth of quote unquote Hollywood history, because he, amongst a select few other people like Jeffrey Katzenberg, even Steven Spielberg, other individuals, Robert Eisner, people whose names I can rattle off to you. These guys have been the ones who have led us into the new dawn of digital communication, of online communications. And this book, by the way, which I just read from cover to cover, it ends, which I was hoping, ends with Ovitz's introduction and his prognosis of the new online digital age when he's going around as sort of a legacy media emeritus, let's call him, who's meeting different individuals, the up and comers, the men, and now more and more women who are in their mid to late 20s and 30s, who are going to be, and that's a lot of you who are watching today. This episode here is going to be directed largely to the up and coming generation, because this is our only hope for better or worse to guide us in the correct direction. And we can't but help follow, for better or worse, follow in the footsteps of people like Michael Ovitz. And sure, he has his regrets, and he makes his apologies to certain characters, individuals, institutions, and he details their struggles against each other, with each other, moving in the same direction within the same organization, Creative Artists Agency, CAA for short. Many of you may know that organization. They made a huge run over the past 30 years or so. And by the time he was 50, I think he was done with that leg of his race towards immortality, and started trying different opportunities, including a brief stint at the Disney Corporation, where he ran into a buzzsaw called Michael Eisner, who he thought was his friend. And if there's anything that you can learn from this book, is that there are only business associates, there are really no friends. And by the way, that's not unique to Hollywood, quote unquote, or the entertainment business. That's true in any institution you want to look at, including my own. And as I'm reading this book and referencing some of the people, individuals, and scenarios that he skims over, Michael Ovitz, I can't help but recall a lot of my own personal and professional struggles in my own world. And I think you, who, whatever line of endeavor you're engaged with, you're going to find a lot of value in what this old man has to, these boomer, he's a boomer. He's not much older than me. We grew up watching the same cartoons on Saturday morning. And I mean, he went to UCLA. He's from the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. Um, he's in Southern California, and he grew up in his dad or his family was not in show business as such, but his old man was in the sales business. He was a good old fashioned liquor salesman, Mr. Ovitz. And I guess he had a region that he had to service. And I guess Michael Ovitz gets him a lot of credit for not necessarily sitting him on his knee and giving him the facts of life, but just observing how his father operated. Let me give him one concrete example. His father would bring home these broken cases of Seagram's 7. This is whiskey or whatever it was handled by. And by the way, some of you might know the name Seagram's, right? You immediately we're talking about some heavy hitters. Talking about the Bronfman family, right, of Canada and U.S. and all their progeny. And you're talking about the World Zionist organization. Samuel Bronfman Sr. was heavily involved with that. Ovitz does not really cover a lot of that. The Israel connection. I think he's still trying to tread lightly in there, but I think the connection between media and Hollywood, as it becomes more open and people are writing about it, scholars and journals write about it, we're going to see the degree to which Ovitz himself was involved in what we now call the Epstein class. In fact, they were, I don't know how close they were, but they were buddy. At a certain level, they're all going to hang with each other. I mean, hang out. Not maybe they will hang. I don't know. Or self-hang. We won't go into that at this point. So there's a lot in the book. It's rich with details, stories, which I could take 2 hours just talking to you about some of my favorite anecdotes that Ovitz relates. Whoever helped him and I'm sure he had help. He's too busy to sit down and write these books himself. Whoever helped him write the book, his ghostwriter, his editors, they did an excellent job. There's a lot of facts checking, not just to reduce the possibility of being sued for libel, but there's a lot of historical points and timelines that I cross-checked it myself, and they all line up correctly. So and so was here and there in a certain space and time that he talks about. So on many levels, this book really works for you. But I want to see for myself how it squares up with the up and coming generation, as I told you, and there's a subset in this up and coming generation that I allude to constantly in my talks. And that subset is the Yeller people, the people of the Pacific Rim, the people of Asia, the Asia Pacific, right? And Eisner, because he grew up in the San Fernando Valley amongst yellow people, I'm sure he went to high school and junior high and elementary school with a lot of Japanese American kids and Chinese American. He's my age, so there weren't as many Koreans at that point. But so he knows us, and we all played together and horsed around and joked, and we're on the sports teams and played in the band and went to the same dances and hung out at the same Bob's Big Boy or whatever it is. He's part of that world. So it makes it even more of a loss. It's a loss to him. It's a loss to American society in general, not to me, because I found my ways of getting my fill of Yeller culture. I mean, up to the point of going there and living for long stretches of time, studying and all this. And I mention this is because I'll have to hand it to Michael Ovitz. He studied the Pacific Rim peoples, the Asian people, if you want to call them, I call them yellers, before it became cool and before it became mandatory. Today, it is mandatory for you to understand what's happening in China and Japan and beyond the cosplay, beyond the superficial, beyond the Gojira movies, beyond the Gunga Din movies that his forefathers were making in Hollywood with Sam Jaffe. He was a Jew who was playing Gunga Din, this loyal Indian Sahib. All right, that might have been okay in the 1930s. Or Charlie Chan, who was also a Jew who played a Chinaman. That was okay for his father's generation, the liquor salesman. And all the liquor salesmen were Jews themselves, or they were Sicilians. Right? They had an ethnic cohesion there that was born out of necessity because they weren't allowed in the primary economy of high finance and Wall Street and being heads of their own corporations like the Disney corporate. That changed, of course. And uh, Ovitz was part of that modern contemporary guard that were able to break that barrier. By the way, the large Jewish American community that settled in the San Fernando Valley is very Jewish, even now, Woodland Hills and throughout the whole valley, not so much Van Nuys or Pacoima, but this is north of Los Angeles. When people talk about Hollywood, you're really talking about the San Fernando Valley. That's where a lot of the music studios are, production. A lot of Hollywood people live up there, studio city, writers, performers, wannabes, prostitutes, you name it, they're there. Or they live on, in his mind, Ovitz thought that he lived on the wrong side of the hill. He wanted to get over on the west side to live in Beverly Hills or Brentwood at minimum, but he was stuck in the valley with the middle-class Jews. But his family, his father benefited from finally having that whole area of California rezoned and brought up to civil rights compliance that allowed Jews to move into the neighborhood, because there was something back in the old days of Ovitz's father's generation, his mother and his father, his parents' generation, where there were these racial covenants, ethnic covenants, protective covenants, they were called. And these were agreements in the if you're a renter, in the leases, or if you're a buyer, in the deeds of sale, that said only certain groups are allowed to buy here and live here. And these are your white Anglo-Saxon Protestant mafia that controlled it. But because he came along in a time when those restrictions were being challenged in the courts, the California Supreme Court, as well as at the federal level, he was amongst the first minority groups, his parents, to be able to even live in the San Fernando Valley. Because prior to that, guess where the Jews of any economic standing, guess where they lived and who their neighbors were? Yellow people like me and browns, a Mexican. They live with the Mexicans and the Chinese and the Japanese kids, because we are all put in the same racial category. So they were the first group, Jews were the first group to escape the ghetto and move into the promised land, which is the San Fernando Valley. And of course, I couldn't live there. My parents couldn't, not that I'd want to. I understand what he's talking about when he writes about the vapidity and the sterility of the San Fernando Valley. I know, because I lived on the opposite end, Orange County. It was very similar. It's changed today, of course. So anyway, there's all these different historical, political nuances here that helps to explain the rise of the Ovitz-Epstein class, right? Which is beginning to understand, well, the real top dogs already understand it. They've been investing in China and Japan now for 30, 40 years. They've been investing in Japan since the end of World War II, finance capital to help stimulate the economy for the new world Asia Pacific order. But for most of the people, especially the old guards, the old Lew Wassermans, Remember me talking about Lou Wasserman and his wife, Edie Wasserman? These were like Mr. and Mrs. Hollywood of his father's generation, the old guard. These were the guys who were a little bit younger than the original Godfathers, the founders of Golden Age Hollywood, right? Jack Warner, Marcus Lowe, all those the guys that would hang out in Beverly Hills with cigars, and every Saturday night or Friday, once a week, they get together and drink and play poker, making bets of hundreds of dollars. I mean, this would scare most normal people out of the, and they're betting their houses and their mistresses. And I mean, these guys are, and they would bet their own fortunes in financing movie. These were the old gold, and that's when the movies were the best, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, there were some good ones. You know, I'm not going to make a blanket statement like that. And Ovitz had a hand in some of the best known movies and TV shows, because originally CAA was a creative artist agency, was saddled with the stigma of being a television outfit, right? They only, and back then, I don't know if you realize this, but if you were in television and you're an actor or a writer or director, you were second class. Only more recently has the distinction between film and television and new media that's blurred, and maybe the boundaries have obliterated by now. But when he was coming up, he was saddled with that stigma, but he ran with it. That was really the basis of CAA with his partners, who I'll talk about a little bit, because he didn't get there by himself. He had some lieutenants, some partners. Most of them he eventually fell out with, and according to this book, they're now, by their 70s. They've been out of the game for 15, maybe 20 years. It's a young man's game. By the time you're 50, if you haven't gathered your stack of money and made your imprint by then, you're not going to make it. That's just reality. It's just like being an athlete. You don't see you don't see any 50-year-old athletes out there. Maybe LeBron James will break that trend, but by the time they're 30, 35, they're pretty, depending on the sport, they're out. But it's the same within this high charge bit, because they work hard. All right? You can't take that away from them. They work hard. In fact, the distinction between what work is and what play is does not exist. So for the young people who are watching that is the type of commitment that's going to be required of you if you want to make it in whatever field you have identified as being the area where you are going to shine and where you are going to excel. It has to be 100% commitment. It's going to ruin your health. It's going to ruin your relationships, and you still might not make it. How's that for a deal? But if you have the right, this is where I agree with Ovitz. Even if you don't have the right connections right now, but if you have the right mindset, if you have the right mentality, you will make it. I'm sure of it, right? And I'll use I won't talk too much about myself, I promise. But using my own experiences, what Ovitz is saying resonates with me. It rings true. Now, the big difference is that he's fighting hand and fist, like, man, just acrimonious. I'm really underhanded, which I appreciate. I like to learn new techniques on how to screw people over. But because I did it all throughout my professional career, both as a preventive gesture as well as retaliatory and as payback. To me, that's legitimate. That is the way of the warrior. You cannot live under the same sky as someone who has screwed you over or someone that's close to you. It's just can't. That's part of, my yellow ethical moral system. I know it's not very Christian, but the reason why these precepts in Christianity were set up there is because it was understood we are predisposed to these types of base behavior, and I haven't shed them all, even at my age. So I understand. I don't think Ovitz has either. I don't think he ever will. He was socialized in the same grueling regime as me And there's a part of you that never leaves that zone. No matter how rich, how privileged, how accomplished you might be, you're still locked in that time zone, that time space. And yeah, he's a San Fernando Valley kid. He even went to UCLA. Okay, I like to talk about schooling and education. Sometimes it doesn't matter, especially in the entertainment business. Probably in sports and entertainment, a formal education matters at least, but even there, it's becoming more of a requirement, right? Not a requirement, but a means of meeting people, and it's called the hangout factor. Musicians who are trying to work their way up, you have to develop a good reputation as a good hang. Like you're not there and just sitting there wheeling around. I'm just playing by yourself, not listening, and think that you think you're the second coming of Yngwie Malmsteen or Eddie Van Halen, whatever it is. You have to be able to, even the top guys, you have to meld into the group concept. Otherwise, you're not going to get hired. So he is the master of this, and I am also going to be bringing in literature that you can refer to that will help you do a lot of self-study. This is really a primer of new media success, right? What he's done, and Michael Eisner, Robert Iger, what he's done is already documented. It's there. We're living in the remnants of it, but it's a new world now. All right. I want to make this clear. It's a new world. The boundaries are really fluid, and it is and that type of situation benefits the younger generation, the insurgency. That's why you're not going to hear me as a boomer be downgrading the millennials or the post-millennial. I can't relate. Whatever it is, you have to listen to everybody. You have to talk to everybody, transgenerationally, transsexually, if you want, whoever. If you want to make money comes in the form of all kinds of people, even yeller people, which we'll be talking about. I told you that. Because let me get this out on the table right now. So far as yeller people and their general exclusion from the hallways of power in the entertainment business, let's call it Hollywood, let's call it Saturday Night Live, wherever it may be, or the publishing business. If you're only a certain type of yeller person, then you'll be admitted because you suit the agenda for the people who are in charge, which is not the yeller people. So instead of trying to meet those criteria that have been set up for you to fail, and also to give up 10, 15, 20% of your income to guys like Michael Ovitz, the real solution is develop your own game, because that's how he did it. Him and his buddies, Ron Meyer and Bill Haber, a couple of other partners. Those are the big three of CAA who broke off from the William Morris Agency and started their own insurgency. And I think they were incorporated by 1975. But within 10 years, that company was huge. It was big. It was the 800-pound gorilla. And all the other studios and chieftains of the remaining corporations, because all the old guys had pretty much gone by that time, and all the writers and the top talent, from Robert De Niro to you name it, Bette Midler, he's dealt with all of them, either pursuing them or having them under contract as talent, not just actors, but also writers. And he was really good with directors, Michael Ovitz. He finally managed to lure, for example, Steven Spielberg after his long time agency affiliation. All right. So I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let me show you a little bit about, let me see. The 20th year anniversary of Creative Artists Agency.
was 20 years ago today. Michael Ovitz taught the gang to play. They've never been out of style, and they're guaranteed to have a smile. So let me introduce to you.
If it's something strange in your neighborhood, who you gonna call? Ghostbusters!
We came, we saw, we kicked its ass.
They have packaged some of the most successful movies ever made.
I'm thinking about it. Let's do it, okay?
Are you taking any prescription medication?
Book the world's highest grossing concerts.
Don't bring around a cloud to rain on my parade.
And they control the profitable domain of television.
20 years ago, an industry phenomenon was formed by a band of renegade agents from the bowels of the formidable William Morris Agency. They managed to construct an entertainment edifice of gigantic proportions, which has changed the way that Hollywood does business. As a result, they have come to represent most of the top talent in Hollywood and are now venturing into uncharted regions of the information superhighway.
I can't recall a thing.
Well, 20 years ago, I was actually...
20 years ago, where I decided that Indianapolis was enough for me, a whole year there, so I decided to move to Los Angeles.
February of 1975, I was going to school on Long Island.
20 years ago, I was a senior in college, getting ready to get out into the world.
Sing you a little song from that. If I were a rich man.
I'm going to have to take that off because I'm sure I'll get a copyright strike, even though he sang even just one bar of it. You saw Wolfgang Puck, right? The guy who revolutionized California cuisine and made it national and even international. Well, guess who discovered Wolfgang Puck, or Wolfgang Puck, if you prefer? None other than Michael Ovitz. And guess who I would give him credit for this? Guess who was one of the key figures who helped to popularize sushi culture amongst the elite and the tastemakers, quote unquote? Michael Ovitz, because he found this German guy who had a great sense of hospitality and can cook his ass off and was a great chef, a real chef. He used to hang out at these places where he was treated like a king. They didn't know who the hell he was, but they served him 5-star quality sushi fresh. And you can get good fresh fish in LA, Los Angeles. They fly it in right from Tsukiji Market in Tokyo. Like it gets here within 10 hours or something. It'll be on your plate by dinner. All right. So he knew or cultivated connections with people like Nobu Matsuhisa. And that is the namesake of the restaurant Nobu. It's called Nobu now, right? That was originally in LA. And then whenever Robert De Niro, who became a CAA client, came into town, Michael Ovitz would take him out for sushi at Nobu Matsuhisa, who ran this little hole-in-the-wall place with his wifey. And then Robert De Niro, Mr. Tough Guy, Mr. Goodfella, got into Japanese cuisine, Japonica, sushi culture. And then guess what? He later became a partner with Nobu Matsuhisa in New York City, in Soma, I guess, down there. I've been by the restaurant, never been in because I can't afford it. All right. I'll admit it. I just cannot afford. I have to go to the cheaper places, which, by the way, are not that much, are almost as good as some of the elite places. So anyway, there's stories upon stories like this. He also found other restaurateurs. And so he's Ovitz and his friends, his network, are shaping American culture in so many different ways, like clothing, fashion, and the movies are obvious, right? The television shows, and then new media. Yet there's something that's nagging in the mind of one Michael Ovitz with his university degree in psychology. He majored in psychology. I would argue that he put his psychology degree in good use, but I think it was probably more his father and family influence that got him over into the culture of Hollywood than any of the psychology guys. And the reason why I'm talking about the academic end of it is because before we end today, and I'll hope I don't forget, because I'm trying to give ideas and opportunities to the younger people in the audience. But before we leave today, I want to propose a vast untapped market for creative talent that CAA or all these successors, the wannabes, the new Silicon Valley insurgency, that they have not really tapped into it because they don't, just like the creation of CAA in 1975, the old guard didn't see there was a problem with the existing system. I do see a radical, fundamental problem with the current system of profit taking and profit making and profit sharing in creative arts and generation and distribution on a global level, including the countries of the Pacific Rim in Asia, Pacific, East Asia, and increasingly Southeast Asia and South Asia. All right. We're way past the time where we have to tune in to Saturday Night Live and see this yellow fag be the sole representation of what a yeller man is. Okay. This guy's name is Bowen Yang. Apparently he's a stand-up comedian. But believe me, if you get a gig, especially a performing slot with SNL, who are, by the way, at least back in the golden days of CA, they were in the pocket of Michael Ovitz. That's why they could bring them on the 20th anniversary show and contribute these little homages to Michael Ovitz and crew. But we're long past that point where we have Hop Sing as our only yeller man on network television programs, run by Lorne Michaels. I don't know if he's a CAA guy. He's not even American. He's a Canadian. So, by the way, he got his yeller ass fired, Bowen Yang. I don't know if you realize he was just sort of a temporary stopgap because there were these different Asian American, quote unquote, media activist groups were saying, hey, how come we don't have any of our people on the network? Okay. And you can tell by the disparaging tone of my voice is that these guys are hired to do that by the networks, just like the NCAA is hired by Wall Street, and the DEI people are hired to create these fake opposition organizations to get them off the hook and to pretend they're actually making strides towards true equity in culture, society, and the economy. But they're not. So I'm going from the NCAA to the NCAYA. That's the National Association for the Advancement of Yellow People. So anyway, I bought this issue. It came the other day specifically because I wanted to see how Bowen Yang was being narrativized with the GLBTQ mafia, which is now in control. So Ovitz was kind of on his way out when the DEI and the LGBTQ mafia, GLAAD, that's their acronym, GLAAD. And by the way, these GLAAD people try to recruit me because I'm an expert in television media history. You know my background. So they wanted my juice to bring to the party so that I would validate the attempt to queer all Asian people, Korean K-pop idols, J-pop idols, and whoever else, right? And instead makes Sylvester Stallone or Steven Seagal the macho man that the honeys would go for, the yellow honeys would go for, but not Bowen Yang because he's gay. All right, so that's part of my agenda here. We're going to take a look at, maybe I'll do it right now. Take a look at this one yeller girl who snagged an internship at Creative Artists Agency. And I mean, I'm just watching her and I said, she's clueless. She got a 4.0 GPA and some advanced placement credits and went to the University of Spoiled Children, USC. By the way, for those of you who don't know, USC and UCLA are like the two major feeder schools to the film business and entertainment. So that's where a lot of kids go. It's just like in you want to go to the New York media business, a lot of the kids go to Syracuse because that's where Freddie Silverman made his bones and other people since then. Sportscasters, executives, talent as well. So USC and UCLA plays a similar function in the local area. It's no accident that Michael Ovitz went to UCLA. I mean, he could be taking classes. He talks about in the book. He was finishing his major in psychology at UCLA, but still drive a few minutes away to Culver City to hold down his job with the studio, showing people around on tours. He didn't start at the top, by the way. If you think you're going to start on the top, even if you're a Nepo baby, think again. You're going to have to pay some dues. Or you have to pretend to. You can probably get a contract and, play down the fact that you grew up with a silver spoon in your mouth. But Ovitz's case, he didn't really have much of a connection. Here and there, he'd have some hookups with his father or his family or whoever else. So that's USC, that's UCLA. And that's why you see, by the way, just as an aside, you see a lot of celebs trying to get their children into UCLA or USC because these are considered prestige schools. You get to hang out with all the big ballers. You're just like in the frat room in your PJs, smoking pot. And these are the guys you're going to be ruling the world with in a few years. They're going to be the lawyers, the judges, the educators, the medical doctors. They're going to work for the UCLA medical school. You're all going to be part of the same happy family. And of course, you've seen my take on the whole occult ritual, graduation, initiation. It's a cult system that I've already reviewed. Well, Ovitz is part. He doesn't talk about what fraternities he belonged to. It's probably the Jewish fraternity. There's more than one at the UCLA. That's for you to find out. That's not in the book, right? But they have extensive contacts and hookups that are operating. And I'm saying that for those of you who are listening here and think, well, gee, I don't come from that background. I don't have any hookups. Think again. Your inventory is much deeper and stronger and potent than you imagine. What's happening is that you're already mentally disqualifying yourself from the competition. All right, just like I was reading comments of my previous talk on Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, and someone said, "Oh, I don't pay any attention to Hollywood. I don't care about it." Like who the hell are you? And they don't really care. You may not care anything about Hollywood, but Hollywood cares about you. They are constructing your consciousness, and you're going to say, "I'm just opting out." You're not going to opt out of shit. You're not going to opt out of anything. You're going to be on the playing field or in the ring, whether you want to be or not. So you better come ready, at least mentally. Be ready otherwise you're going to be pummeled and you won't know what the hell hit you. Okay, I'm just trying to be straight with all the people, all the whiners and the complainers and the kvetchers. Kvetch is a Yiddish word. Let me take this time. Where is it? This is a required reading for all yellow people or all you goys out there, you goyim. I've been reading different editions of this for decades. Leo Roston, I'm always promoting his book. I don't have a cut in the publishing, or I don't know Leo Rossin. He's probably dead. The new editions are probably made by a team, but it's called The Joys of Yiddish. And there's what's called, look up the word in there. It's the word, or look up on your Google machine. Look up the Yiddish word schmooze. Schmooze. It's not the degree that's going to get you over. It's your smooze. I'm sorry. I'm trying to find the page. Yeah, there's an entry, a long one. Schmooze. Rhymes with loose. Some pronounce it rhyme with ooze. It's Hebrew originally. Yiddish, right? Shumus, originally things heard, rumors, idle talk, news. In Amerindish, that means American form of adaptation of Yiddish. Both a verb and a noun. Schmooze means a friendly, gossipy, prolonged heart-to-heart talk, or to have such a talk. All right. He gives an example here. They had a little schmooze and settled everything. She schmoozed with her father until dinner. How about a walk and a schmooze? These are all, you could use all these terms, right? But if you're a Yeller person and you grew up in a non-English speaking, let alone non-English, Yiddish culture, or if you're a Goyim, you're probably more equipped because you grew up watching sitcoms and movies, which are heavily Yiddish inflected. You'll have some idea of the context what's wrong. But if you're a yellow person or a recent immigrant, you won't know what the hell they're talking about. And therefore, you will be excluded from the schmooze factor. And it's the schmooze factor that will get you the job of your dreams and will allow you to create an organization that will rival anything people have ever imagined, including CAA. That's happening. It's happening right now as we speak. It's happening right up close to me in Silicon Valley, which, if you haven't noticed lately, is full of Yeller people. But what are they doing? They're handing over their creativity, their coding ability, their intellectual facility, their vision. They're handing it over to the middleman, the Epstein class, the Ovitz class. They're handing it over. So I say keep it. Create your own agency so you can exert your own agencies in the wider world. This is happening right now, and I'm giving it a nudge. And I've mentored many undergraduates in these realities when I was teaching, because they were coming from family settings where they're refugees, they're first generation immigrants. They might have been the first people in college. They had no idea of the culture, let alone the business culture that will reward people like your Michael Ovitz or your Jeffrey Epstein, and will punish anybody who departs from that system. And by punishment, I'm talking about not just exclusion from employment, but I'm talking about to the extreme, like death. Like you could be whacked. If you have something that they want, intellectual property, you might wind up like Prince. You might wind up like Michael Jackson. You might wind up like Sam Cooke. I mean, do I need to keep on going? There's a whole long list. And there were agents, lawyers, attorneys, mockers, tough guys, mafiosi who were involved in all these cases you want to look at. They don't care. They will whack a head of state. They will whack JFK. So when I see this girl from USC, these other yellow people say, hey, how did you get on at CAA? You must be special. She's clueless. Let's take a look at it. It's going to take a couple seconds to load it up here. I didn't.
they prefer, if you don't have that much experience, they are aware of everything that's going on, even though you assume they are not. More people are not expecting to stay at agencies than you would think. They call up studios, execs, like places. So this guy wants to do this genre next year. Do you have something coming up? You're allowed to be introverted, but you also need to know how to present yourself. They're not gonna try to hide or mask their anger at you leaving. Like, they're gonna take everything from you as soon as possible because they're like, we care about our clients, our materials. And there are interns who would not be as nice to other interns. In today's job market, it's so unpredictable. Your numbers are gonna win, like quantity is gonna win.
Well, I've been told at a company that shall remain nameless, if your application does not have a cover letter, they just throw it out. Lillian, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, welcome. We're so excited to have you just talking about, the corporate side of filmmaking, right? You guys are the people who make the movies happen, really.
Yeah. Well, first of all, talk a little bit about your USC journey, and you recently graduated. Walk us through how you got into film and how you got into USC.
So I stumbled into casting because I saw someone literally asking for someone to help with their big passion project full of like USC alums. So I stepped up. I was like, I'm into this field. I worked as a producer on like several short films. I was like, casting was fun. And once I joined that, I learned so much just through doing it. And somehow I got another project that was even bigger. So it just sort of like, I sort of got casting on my resume by stumbling into it. But casting actually really helped me get my agency job and my later casting internship. So, yeah.
Yeah, speaking of internships, sets are great and a lot of people are hands-on and they do want to just work on set, but there's this whole other sector in entertainment that's all about representation and all about making deals and making things happen. So talk a little bit about your experience in that world, whether it's through internships or jobs at production companies and whatnot. Like, what was your first step and how did that inform your creative process and also mapping out a career?
Yeah, I didn't really have a very specific map of my career when I first started applying to internships. Early on, it was just driven by stress. Like, everyone else getting one. If I don't get one, I'm not gonna find a job. Like I feel like we overestimate people's like exact idea of their life, because sometimes I feel like it's so much chance, opportunity, and we don't always know we're set on something until we've tried it. That I feel like that's why like mentors and professors tell us to just be open-minded about everything, because you don't really know where you're going to end up in and where you're going to be great in. But yeah, I started applying to internships when it was the earliest I could as an international student because of all the troubles I'm not going to, bother you with. But I was basically allowed to start applying around sophomore year. And at first I got those unpaid script coverage internships. And luckily I also found one that was working for like an independent producer, and I was doing script coverage for him. And I think many of his like writer friends were trying to like get into festivals, and he actually was so nice, he paid me. I'm like, yeah, I guess that's what the industry is like right now. Like, he was so nice, he paid me.
Yellow Girl is just so happy that she even got paid. See, she ain't even thinking about owning CAA. That's what I'm trying to inculcate in the new insurgency, the one that has its geographic setting in Silicon Valley. In other words, it's not really linked. A lot of it's overseas now. A lot of it's in places like Mumbai or Seoul or places in Thailand. Right, because they can do it remotely now. Right, the whole environment is, you don't need to be in LA. But if you need to go to LA, then you need to go through USC, UCLA to get your foot in the door. They'll see it on your resume, and okay, you already passed that one test. But even then, it's not going to disqualify you. Nothing disqualifies you except your mind. That will disqualify you, because David Geffen famously, story's well known, it's in his own book. forged a letter. He was working at the mailroom. I think it was a William Morris agency in LA. He forged a letter on UCLA letterhead and sent it to a letter of recommendation from professor whoever else. And since he was working in the mailroom, he was able to intercept the letter, so it never reached the personnel person, and was able to snake his way. And by the time they found out that he didn't even have a college degree, he was already bossing people around. And you know what happened to David Geffen? He became fabulously wealthy. He's the G in the SKG organization, one of the successors to CAA. Spielberg, Katzenberg, and Geffen. Big time. Look him up, Geffen. And I gave a talk on him a while back about his marital woes because he married a black Mandingo gold digger dude who's taken him to court. He wasn't with him very long, but now he wants half. This legendary deal maker and schmooze master, David Geffen himself, got pimped. You can tell I enjoy that story. Now that should be a made for TV movie, or it should be a feature film. I want to write it. I want to produce it. I want to executive produce. I don't want to direct it. I don't have the energy like that anymore. But I want to come up with projects, and I'll hand them off to you talented people, and just cut me in for a certain percentage. All right. Right. Even at my advanced stage, I'm still. You can tell I'm hustling, because I'm dead serious about all this program stuff. Michael Ovitz retired when he was 50. That's when I started gathering momentum. All right. Most of your world-class athletes are out by their 30. You're in my world, you're nothing at that age. You're still learning. You're still apprenticing, unless you're a genius physicist or something. But for the rest of us, we're just plodding along. And it's at the back end of the career where we come to excellence and have our most impact on the up and coming generation. And I'm mentioning this is because, as I told you before we leave, I'm going to be proposing a new model that has been lying there for the taking. But these people are too locked into their own little world. It's called conservatism. They just want to hold on to what they have, and they can't really see a need. By the way, there's tons of stories where Michael Ovitz, to his credit, was able to identify needs before anyone else, and he jumped on it. In some cases, he was premature. He was 2 or 3 years, 5 years behind or before the technology was able to, but he was already thinking beyond what is existing. So I have to give him credit for that. He doesn't really consider himself to be a creative person. He says, well, I'm an art collector. I have Matisse's and Van Gogh and whoever else. He has a whole wing of his Beverly Hills mansion devoted to all the art that he's been collecting over the years. But I think he shortchanges himself in the creativity department. He has a lot of creativity. He has a lot of imagination. It's a building institutions and schmoozing. That's an art. I could never do that. I don't want to talk to a bunch of. I'm talking about Ovitz. He made, before he left the day, and his day started very, very early. His day started at 5 a.m. in the morning. And he'd do his martial arts routine religiously every day. And he would read all the different newspapers and journals on his exercise bike before he even got into the office. But before he left the office at CAA, he had made 300 phone calls. So I'm reading that. I go, wow, you deserve all the money in the world that you had, because that would have driven me crazy. All right. This book is, he's not bragging about any of this book. He's just sort of mentioning it in passing or matter of factly. And it gives us I think a pretty honest ethnography, if you want to call it that, of a high-level owner, not executive, an owner of his own media empire, his own media enterprise. All right. That's why I give 5 stars. That's why I said if you have any, whatever field you're in, you don't have to be in entertainment. You need to read this book if you're trying to figure stuff out. And it's never too late to learn new stuff. He's learning about the new tech, calling for, cold calling, big names, people like Mark Andreessen, whoever else, Jeff Bezos, just cold calling. Say, my name's Michael Ovitz. I want to learn about the new digital age. So, yeah, okay, let's get together. And then they schmooze. They have dinner. They have sushi. All right. They have some Sapporo beer. And then maybe they do some karaoke, whatever else. By the way, he got into this, the whole Japanese food culture, because he saw that Japan was going to be, they already starting, they were going to be investing heavily in the American economy, especially in the American media industry. And he put himself in between the Japanese executives based in Tokyo or Osaka who would come and negotiate Japanese style, not Jewish style, Japanese style. There's a huge difference. But to his credit, Ovitz studied the Japanese style of management. He understood, I think, very, very, maybe his psychology background helped him. He understood the Japanese psychology. I've read the same material. I've lived there for many years. I understand that when you're asking for something, you can't not be direct. Hey, I want this, I want that. Or if you're turning down something, you can't say no, I can't do it. Right? There's an interpersonal switch that you have to flip if you want to if you want to succeed in that setting. Because the American culture is much more direct, and it's legalistic and it's not very ambiguous. But the Japanese, not just in corporate, but in the general society and culture, is that the speakers, assume that you have this tacit knowledge, it's called TACIT, that you have cultural knowledge and competence, and you can speak without uttering any words. They even have a term for it. It's called hara-ge. Hara is belly. Like harakiri, you've heard that term? It's actually supposed to be seppuku, but hara is a belly, and ge is a compound word for language. It's a belly language. So when you're dealing with these transactions that involves hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe billions, you're negotiating with your belly talk, your belly language, your feeling, your sense of it. And Ovitz knew this, and he would warn the other guys, because the other guys go into the board meetings with the Japanese executives, including all the way to the top of Sony, Morita Akio. He was the legendary head of Sony. He understood American culture and business practices more than a lot of other people. He lived in America for a couple of years. He understood that he needed to learn the culture and society before he could start moving in to acquisitions and mergers in the U.S. and to expand his market for Sony products. This is Morita Akio. So he can hang with him because he had done all his background reading. So I'm following his account there of how he was dealing with the Japanese. And I was reminded, because I lived through it, I was the butt of a lot of this animus, right? In the 80s, there was heavily anti-Japanese, anti-Japanese American, anti-Asian, like there is now. There's a lot of anti-Chinese, the Chacams sentiment. And people don't know I'm not Chinese, but it doesn't matter. I'm a yellow man, right? So we're getting it from the black people, we're getting it from the brown people, we're getting it from the white people, right? They said they never heard no multicultural. They never heard of the civil rights movement today, right? But Ovitz, to his credit, in the 80s, knew what was going on, and he was reading Morita's books. Akio, the guy that was the head of Sony, translated into English. There was a literature being developed, like say the Harvard School of Business or maybe the Anderson School of Business, UCLA. There are the business administration, the business school professors were already researching the Japanese culture of business. Right. I met some of them, the people. Chalmers Johnson was one guy. He was at Berkeley, political science. Later went to UC San Diego. He was an intelligence guy, by the way, CIA. Chalmers Johnson, very good critic later on of the national security state. But I remember in the 80s, there was a guy named William Ouchi. I think he was teaching at UCLA, and he was publishing all these books about how to do business with the Japanese. And Ovitz, it's obvious that he assimilated this literature. He was not just a martial arts kung fu-ish guy that said, oh, this is cool, and I'm going to eat some sushi on the side. No, he was into it. He assimilated it. All right. So when I tell you that you need to browse and study the joys of Yiddish, I'm passing on valuable cultural information. This is how I taught my students at UC Davis. They didn't know what the hell I was when I talked to them about schmooze or chutzpah. They go, well, that was not in our vocabulary list when we were studying for the SAT. I said, of course it's not. This is vernacular. This is the real America. That's what I'm here. This is cultural forensics. All right. So let's take a look at, because you might think I'm blowing up or making grand claims for CAA. And this also, what I'm about to show you, reinforces my assertion that Ovitz's success was because he was one of the first of his generation to understand the rise of East Asia in America. And he adapted accordingly. And he did it with the architecture as well. So here he hired I.M. Pei, P-E-I. Look him up if you don't know about him already. Let me see if I can find that file. This is in Beverly Hills, California. This is the building designed by the internationally known architect I.M. Pei. Now, I will say I've never visited that. I've driven by the place, but I've never stopped to. I had no business being there, so I never stopped and looked in. But if I'm ever driving along Sunset Boulevard and I have like a half an hour to spare, I will go in there. And I think Sony leased it after Ovitz left CAA. He left that building. They built another building, which I'll show you in a moment. A grander building, this time in Century City, which ironically was built on the former lot of 20th Century Fox. But anyway, creating this monument with an incredible atrium with all the masterpieces of art would impress his customers or would-be or expectant clients and existing clients. It was right there for all. A lot of it's show. A lot of it is show business, all the way, admittedly. So here we go. Let's take a look at the headquarters he built or oversaw in Century City. I have a story for you there. This is the CAA building in BA. Okay, that gives you a overhead view of what's going on. I wasn't able to find any videos of the atrium or in the lobby area. I think I've been in that building in the Century City there's all these multi-story buildings there. People say, well, New York, LA is so flat. New York has real buildings. Yeah, New York does have but so does Century City. So does Los Angeles, right? And it's people like Michael Ovitz, by the way, that helped change the perception of Los Angeles as a world-class city on all levels, especially where it concerns the rise of East Asia. It just never made it into any of his movies. In fact, when he had an opportunity to produce a martial arts movie, which he professed to practice, Michael Ovitz, did he cast a yellow man in the lead role of his martial arts movie? No. He cast Jewish man, Steven Seagal, who came up with this bullshit story about being him the only foreigner ever allowed license to run a dojo in Japan and being fluent in Japanese and all. He was supposedly, Mr. Sushi himself, Steven Seagal. Right. Mr. Miyagi will never take front stage. They'll have a little skinny white boy named Ralph Macchio take the center stage. Okay. And I'm reminding you, the whole age of Bowen Yang ended when he got fired from SNL. And now that Michael Ovitz and the old guard has retired, they're emeritus, and the yellow and the brown people who run Silicon Valley now are those who are producing value and content and creative energy in Silicon Valley. This is your turn, right? And they know it. Why do you think Larry Ellison has that Chinese woman, that hot Chinese woman, holed up with him out on Maui in his little high security compound? Did you check her out? Larry Leisure Suit Ellison, the head of Oracle, which, by the way, left California. They relocated to Texas. I think his real home's out in Maui. Or Larry, Leisure Suit Larry. Why they're all named Larry? Larry Ellison. He had the hots for this one Chinese woman, professor of economics. And of course, I've given a whole talk about how the Hazarian bloodlines are trying to recruit the Sinitic bloodlines, the Li bloodline, into it to advance to the next generation, the New World Order, where all these systems will fuse together. Michael Ovitz class, the Epstein class, is not resting. It's not over. The obsessive attention to Epstein is preventing us from looking at what's going on right now with the real action is going on in the Pacific Rim. But all Alex Jones can talk about is the Chakanoms, or all the traditional legacy right-wingers like Dave Hodges or whoever else, all these old guys who had their training in the John Birch Society. They're utterly ignorant. They might go to Panda restaurants, but that's about as close. They know that California is on the Pacific Rim, but they've never been to the Asian world. They're not interested. Right? But the axis has shifted. That's the good news. Ovitz understood this implicitly and explicitly. Okay, so what I'm talking about here is for you younger people or even older people. It doesn't matter. You can be a player at any age. I'm still hustling myself, right? I put in a lot of effort just so I can get to this position of becoming your fan favorite YouTuber, right? I put a lot of effort in becoming a TubeU celebrity with all of 70,000 subscribers. By the way, I want to take the opportunity to ask you to take pity on me and subscribe to my measly little channel. I have no chat GPT-6 writers for me. I have no AI. I'm not one of these underemployed actors that you see on TubeU who are reading off of these GPT generated scripts and they're playing a journalist. I'm not a retooled comedian like Jimmy Dore or Joe Rogan or Bill Maher, who are all of a sudden these geopolitical experts. And I'm not a fake professor like Professor Zhang. Are these other, you're going to see more yellow people who supposedly come from the academic, but they're bullshitters. Because I'm the OG on that one. All right. I've been doing this. I've had an understanding of TubeU early on and started to exploit its potential very early on by talking to my students, seeing what they were doing, and they were saying, and you said you need to get on YouTube. Me meaning me. You need to get on YouTube. Says this is your world. This is where you can excel. Says you're teaching here at the university, and there's maybe 20, 40 people, 200 at the most students you're reaching over 10 weeks, a quarter. But on YouTube, I can reach 1,000 thousands in just one cast. Says you need, so they got me a YouTube logo T-shirt and got me started. They taught me. They got me set up. All right. This is someone, when Michael Ovitz says that he's talking to the younger people on where the world is taking the media business, that resonates with me because I'm the benefit, because I've left myself open to it. Right. And when I'm telling you this information, it's based on years and years of direct involvement in media studies, especially where it comes to sexuality, where it comes to yeller people in media. I've showed you the books before. I won't bring them out again. I've published extensively in these areas. And the only real response I got was from people like GLAD, who said, we want to use your name, Professor Hamamoto, so that you can convince new Asian American, quote unquote, filmmakers and media makers to do gay content to the exclusion of that, because they don't want us to reproduce. They don't want any male, female, heaven forbid, pairings. That's only going to be the prerogative of Larry Ellison or Larry Summers or whoever else. The guy, Leslie Moonves, he's married to some Chinese American newscaster. That's the ticket. Juju Chang, check out her husband. Right? That is the power alignment that's being required. Now I'm saying you don't have to do that unless you want to, and it's up to you. Okay, what else do you want to see? Let's see Michael Ovitz himself talk about, since he was a psychology major at UCLA. Let's hear him talk about the quote unquote psychology of power. Oh, sorry. It's taking me a while to load this up. And he lectured, now he's in the emeritus status. He lectures on this topic to all the younger people.
One of the things that I admire about you is your voracious appetite for learning. And you started in the William Morris file room and you had access to all these, but it was like you, David Geffen, Barry Diller, all the same sort of path in the file room, reading the history. What's the modern equivalent of that, do you think, for people out there wanting to get ahead at work?
Well, it's a really great question. I'm not sure, frankly, because I love the internet and I love being on my computer to the point where my significant other wants to kill me sometimes because I just love surfing through the internet and going down rabbit holes. First of all, there's a David Geffen and Barry Diller and I are very dissimilar human beings, but we do share a couple of very similar traits. All three of us cut our teeth in the early years in the entertainment business. All three of us have voracious appetites for learning, and all three of us have voracious appetite to read. David and Barry are two of the smartest guys that I know, and they're on top of everything. If you talk to them, it's extraordinary how well read they are. These guys didn't go to college. They're better read than most PhDs that I know in any field. And secondly, we all three demonstrated that as mailroom employees, where we knew the quickest path was education. I have a thing I always say to people that work with me: knowledge is power. And it works for you and against you. And it works for you if you embrace it, use it, read, and try to index it in your head for context. Works against you if it turns you into a liar. And lying is when I started CA in 74, it became very clear to me that lying was a industrial problem in the entertainment business. Everybody didn't tell the truth. One of the reasons they did not tell the truth is since they didn't know the term knowledge is power, but they knew it innately that they had to have an answer. So you could call up an agent and ask them a question. They felt this necessity to have an answer. And by doing that, they'd sometimes, more than half the time, make it up. So we started some very simple rules, which I was shocked in retrospect how revolutionary they were. But they were simple. To me, it was like simpleton logic. Don't lie. If you don't have an answer, here's your answer. Tell you what, Shane, I'm going to get back to you because I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm going to find out. That's highly acceptable. Entertainment business, everybody knows everything. They know everything. It's not possible, by the way. Not possible.
It's the same inside most organizations. Everybody will make up an answer on the fly.
Well, I think people want to show that they're in the know. And I think it's just very fine to show that you're not and that you want to find out. And then the second thing we did was insist on teamwork, which was shocking to everybody because for 75 years, it was one client, one agent. And we would not allow that. All of our clients had multiple agents so they could talk to a lot of different people. In the years I was at CA, we never lost a client. And the reason was if they tired of one person, they'd go to the next. But everyone was up to speed. I mean up to the minute on their career. Our inner office rule was you had to answer your associates first, before the clients, before the buyers. And we were all basically empowered by each other. And if you look at it, the permutation of that thesis is to the 100th power. You can't beat it. And by the way, it's one of the reasons we attracted most of the major working talent. We didn't have any ego about who handled who. We didn't have any ego about passing information. We didn't have any ego about anything because the clients were in the ego business, not us. They had egos not on their own. It was imputed to them because they were movie stars. And
You'll get a lot of very important practical pointers on the management and dealing with people in complex or even simple organizations by reading this book. Who is Michael Ovitz? He's a whole walking encyclopedia of knowledge, of information, right? But I should tell you that he's okay in a one-on-one setting like this, being interviewed. But his reputation to the world and to other people in his industry, they thought he was a SOB. Most people hated him. They thought he was a tyrant, which is probably true. But he claims that he was just playing a role. Someone had to be the bad guy in the whole bad cop, good shot. Someone had to say no to this ego-driven. So, I can understand that. And his job was smoothing, ruffling the feathers of people like Barbara Streisand, for goodness sake, that's a tough job. I mean, even he got tired of it after a while. He said, man, I'm really sick of handling other people's problems. I want to be the head of the Red Cross or go into public service, which he tried, by the way, and found out that that really wasn't in his blood as such. So that's the psychology of it. I think he would make a good sort of a revolving professor in a management school, like at the Anderson School. He's in, the West Side anyway, UCLA, or wherever. He has homes all over the country. He can give lectures, master classes to MBA types, because he does have some semblance of humanity in himself. And I know he wrote this book in a way that's most flattering to himself. He's very humble about it, but he's not going to tell a lot of ugly stories. The ones that I know that he never touched upon, like his relationship with Anthony Pellicano. But I know from studying Anthony Pellicano, for example, that his big Ovitz's buddy, who helped him in the early years of CAA, Ron Myers, they had a falling out. But Ron Myers, for close to 17 years straight, during the time that Pellicano was in prison, Ron Myers, who he first knew at CAA, Ron Myers was sending Pellicano monthly checks for his commissary privileges while he was in the prison. He never forgot. So that, to me, is a stand-up guy, and those are the type of people that I respect. Those are the type of people that I want to do business with. I don't care what industry it is, okay? But he doesn't talk about, for obvious reasons, Pellicano, because Ovitz, the story goes is that Ovitz hired Pellicano to do some off-the-books business, right, to persuade a reluctant client or negotiator to see things his way. All right, that's the part of the book that you're going to have to read through the lines and read other literature, which I encourage you to do. This is not only my profession, but it's my passion to study this particular institution, because I grew up in this environment, but from the outside, because like I told you before, we were not by law allowed into the front door. That yellow woman there who walked into the mailroom and has a job, she might have a false sense of security that she got over. But anyway, let her pursue her dreams. I just wanted to show you. Okay, for you people who are looking for not just an internship or a entry-level job with CAA or the film business, because it's really all the same, whatever field it might be. Let's take a look at this one woman who's a little older and she's kind of been around, and she's expounding upon what the talent agents are like, or agencies like CAA.
Gary Vaynerchuk, you're on the Ask Gary V show with Michael Ovitz.
Wow. Hello.
Hello.
It's an honor.
What's your question?
Michael and Gary.
Thank you.
So I guess I should just ask my question.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I'm assuming. Basically, I just wanted to ask, with being with Creative Artist Agency, what's something that when you work with a lot of other people, kind of high profile, that you don't want them to do, that you're like, oh, this is a mistake they made. They could have been my client, but yeah.
You mean something that you don't want them to do?
Like, what's a mistake that when you have artists who want to be your client, something that they do that prevents you from saying yes to them?
Oh, you mean the other way, where when you're at the top, like a CIA, what would a emerging actor, actress, director, athlete say that could actually turn off CAA from saying, you know what, you're not the right client for us? Is that the question?
Correct.
Interesting.
That's you know, I've never.
The answer is always yes. We want as many clients as possible.
Normally the answer is yes, so I've never thought about that.
You know what's funny? It's funny that both you and I reacted that way. A lot of people talk about be thoughtful about what, you know, my team, very senior people, lots of great people.
This guy talks too much. He thinks he's the object of the interview. It's another squandered opportunity. But I have a story that I'll share from Ovitz's book itself. He did turn down a high-profile client for CAA, and most of you know the name. His name's Irvin Magic Johnson, formerly of the LA Lakers. But did you know that he's a part, in a minority percentage, he's a part owner of the Los Angeles Dodgers? That's Magic Man, the Magic Man. So Ovitz, this is a story from the book. Ovitz said, no, we don't handle athletes. We don't do that. And he made Magic Johnson kind of chase him around because, you know, Magic is the Magic. He owns LA. He's with the Lakers. Back to back. They want the three-peat, right? You got Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, James Worthy, Silk Wilkes, right? You got all the great players, that great lineup of the 80s. So he told him no, and then he thought about it and said, you know, why not? He says, well, the reason why not is because at that time, athletes with their collective bargaining agreement, they can only make a certain amount. In the case of Magic Johnson, it was only $500 million. He was limited to $500 million. And he was locked into something like a 10-year deal or something like that. He had signed the contract. So he was not going to be able to renegotiate even if he wanted to. So Ovitz brought out the charm and the creativity. He sat down with Dr. Jerry Buss, he was the owner of the Lakers at the time. He was a dentist, by the way, by training, by profession. But he made his money in real estate, I believe. Jerry Buss, B-U-S-S. And they restructured the deal. Magic Johnson got his money because Magic Johnson said, listen, when I retired age 40, I want to have some money left over, because he realized he was just getting paid with a high salary, but his playing career was not going to be very long as a professional athlete. You're already starting to break down by your late 20s and 30s. All right. He knew this. Magic Johnson came from a solid working class family. His father was a postal service man. He knew about finances and benefits, and his mother, I think his mother might have been a teacher, something like that. So he was planning for the future, and he finally persuaded Ovitz what his vision was. He wanted to be a businessman in the local area, and he achieved that dream. He wound up owning a part of the LA Dodgers. He owns a lot of these theaters, the Magic Johnson theaters and Baldwin Hills. This is the black upper middle class enclave of Los Angeles. Those are all Magic Johnson theaters and all kinds of holdings. He's a wealthy guy. But the point of the story is that when it comes to learning and education and hitting the books and studying, I totally, you don't have to go to school for that either. Something that should be part of your daily ethic, right? He told Magic Johnson, he said, I want you to read this front page of the Wall Street Journal. And he, right in front of him, Magic says, I don't understand any of this. He said, I don't even have the fundamentals. This is the WSJ. And he says, okay. He was giving him a test. He says, we're going to set you up with people to teach you basic principles of finance. I'm going to buy you a subscription to the WSJ. I'm going to buy you a subscription to Fortune Magazine, Business Week, all the business publications. And it said, I want you to read them from cover to cover as soon as they hit your mailbox. And then you'll have some money when you retire at age 40. As one of the greatest basketball players ever to hit the court, Magic Irvin Johnson. And he did. And, okay, I don't know if it's a bullshit story or not, but I want to believe it. Ovitz would call Magic Johnson every week and quiz him on all the material because Ovitz knew it himself. That's how he got on top, was information. Fast breaking news and information, and the ability to interpret it and assimilate it and to apply it. That's really the essence of what I'm trying to do here with cultural forensics. Number one, so you won't get swamped by all the bullshit that's coming our way right now and into the future. You're prepared mentally. And also, secondly, to come up with solutions that are found in all these different areas that you might not be aware of. Even movies, even television shows. You could learn something by watching an episode of The Simpsons or Married with Children. I might be stretching it there, but you get the point. By reading the popular culture in a certain way, you might be able to have a chance at coming out on top. By the way, this is a characteristic that all these individuals that Michael Ovitz ran into daily, and after his career, the bulk of his career was over, the people in Silicon Valley, the tech bros, that was the characteristic that they all shared. They were insatiable in their quest for knowledge, information, and analysis. They were always thinking, not necessarily about transistors and about the interweb and all that, but just the culture in general, but specific material. These are not stupid people. All right. So when I hear people say, well, look at Peter Thiel, he's stupid, he stutters a lot. Or look at Bill Gates, he looks like a geek. You're missing the whole point. Or I don't want to study the tech bros. They dress weird. They don't have any sense of style. Look at Jeff Bezos. He married that hoochie. He's going to these parties. He's dressing up in a different ward. You're missing the plot. They have information they're generating and they're selling it back to you literally now. They're selling back your own creative output back to you in GPT. This talk here is going to be fed into chat or GPT-6, and it's going to become part of some newscast by an underemployed actor on TubeView. And you're going to think that that's a real journalist. And if you blow the whistle on Chat GPT, this is Alex Karp, who shows up in this book in the latter chapters. Right? Alex Karp, you know who he is. If you go to work for him and your name is Suchir Balaji, you are one of the intellectual coolies. They're typically South Asian, Sri Lankan, Indian, Pakistani, Chinese, mainland Hong Kong, Taiwanese, Malaysian, some Japanese, but most of them, the talent, they keep at home. Those are the ones in Silicon Valley that are not participating, they are making the current revolution. And they're going to miss out because the Epstein class is taking 20% of everything that they come out with. Suchir Balaji blew the whistle on it. He was found suicided in his apartment in San Francisco. Suchir Balaji, I want you to follow up on that case. His parents haven't let it die. And to me, that's emblematic of what I'm talking about, these mafia tactics that are going on. You're seeing these scientists disappearing off the face of the earth as well. The guy Loera, the MIT professor, it could be anybody who has creative or intellectual property under their control. You better find a way to protect that. But first of all, you need to listen to my talks here so that you understand how the New World Order functions and how they operate. Otherwise, you have zero chance. You're just another disposable immigrant that they hired off the street because you were a brilliant student in electrical engineering at Berkeley Computer Science. We're going to hire you. You're going to make us tons of money. And then once we picked your brains, you're gone. Okay, we want something permanent. Something along the lines of the CAA or the William Morris Agency or these other insurgent or these established entities. Okay, I'm almost done here. let's see. Since I'm running out of time, let's go to this is a favorite topic of mine, Netflix, because Netflix seems to have changed the game. They kind of, in a way, have put out the super agents like Michael Ovitz. This is so. I think that the thrust now, the challenge now for you and for me, because I'm going to be helping. I've already done a couple talks on Netflix on this channel. Right when they stopped sending DVDs, physical media, and not just streaming, I did one on that. So I've been following them. I've been to their headquarters down in Los Gatos, California, in the heart of Silicon Valley. I think they're still there. I'm not sure. It's a modest building, by the compared to CA, but they run everything right now. And they're fusing with Amazon. They're fusing with MGM, Amazon, all those people. So this is your opportunity. But let's see what Michael Ovitz has to say about Netflix. And then I'll come back to conclude the festivities.
Up north is the same feeling as when we started CA in the 70s. It is flush with really smart men and women. Everybody's can-do. It's wildly collaborative. The economy is really good. It has everything that you need to make the perfect storm. And everyone up there is trying to do the right thing with really unique ideas. And for me, I'm like a kid in a candy store up there.
377 meetings, by the way, in your first year.
Any
up there,
meetings with Elon Musk by chance?
Some time ago, not recently.
I wanted to ask you about creativity and art versus commerce, which is going on forever, obviously. But it seems now that distribution is taking primacy over creativity and content. And probably it isn't that way, but it just seems like if you can get something onto Netflix, you can probably make it a big hit. It might not be as good as something that's somewhere else, but that's where the audience is. Do you think that's true or not true?
I think part of what you say is true. I got nervous. I thought you were going to ask me to define creativity.
No.
Which was
next time
would take us a couple hours.
We have blue books for those sorts of
I was going to say, I think that the viewing patterns are changing right now as we sit here. Everything is on demand unless you're watching a sporting event or the Olympics or some special event or an election. Everything's on demand. So your point about Netflix pushing maybe certain programs out that aren't as good as others, and they get a sampling, I think that's accurate. But still, the content has to be great to be successful and to be viral and for people to talk about it. But we are in the middle of the largest paradigm shift in viewer pattern changes.
So is Ted Sarandos as powerful now as you were in the late 80s and 1990s?
I think Ted Sarandos is more powerful than almost anybody in history. He goes back to the days of Louis Mayer when he had 100 of the biggest stars and directors and writers.
So that's how it feels to as investors when we look at the ascent of Netflix stock and we read the analyst reports. That's how it feels that they are now calling all of the shots.
Well, they have infinite development money. They can go to any creative person they want. They have basically, when you get right down to it, even though it's not free, but pretty close to free distribution. They're not paying for their distribution. They do have an organization, but it's one click. But what they have that's technically more important is that they have all the data. So they know what you like. Yeah. They know what everybody likes, and they can manufacture programming around the data. I think it's just brilliant what they're doing.
Well, their data, their algorithms do not account for the yeller people who work at Netflix and do all the programming. And that's where you have a huge opportunity. I'm not going to go through my little paradigm shift pitch right now because we're already too late. But my ambition is to put Netflix out of business because they do not have the interest in human, neither does Michael Ovitz for that matter. They do not have the interest in humanity in heart. I mean, they want to milk everything out of the RL, real life, as they can before they shut the door to their Antarctica redoubts. But anyway, that's another exploration. I just thought we'd end on that optimistic / pessimistic note and catch up with what the great Michael Ovitz is up to. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, keep at it. God willing, I'll be back with you next Sunday for some more exciting information. I took so much time that I didn't get to talk about this guy here. His name's Brandon Wade. Just got this book recently, but contrary to his anglicized name, he is a yellow man. He's the guy that developed sugardaddy.com. He's the guy that conceptualized and built this empire built upon hookups between women who are looking for rich dudes to date and marry and to be support, whatever it might be. So he's written a how-to manual on it. So I'm going to go through it. I'm going to share it with you. It's just another example. I told you how this weenie, I think he went to MIT or some weenie of a programmer said, hell, I'm not going to work for Michael Ovitz. I'm going to start my own gig. It's going to be called Sugar Daddy. So if he's watching, Brandon Wade, hit me up. We'll collaborate on a feature film that's going to be about the story of your life. It's going to be a biopic, as it's called in the trade, about sugardaddy.com, right? I think people are lined up to watch that one. It's going to be great. I love projects, ladies and gentlemen. I love them just as much as Michael Ovitz, but I don't want to hang out with his crew over CAA. I don't want to take any phone calls. I don't want to return any phone calls. I want to be left the hell alone. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you back, God willing, on Sunday of next week. Thank you. Bye.